Greetings, everybody. Welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So I want to welcome you here to an episode, late night, of course, episode of Into the Prog Universe, or Progverse if you prefer. This is an episode that will go on Saturday nights every second week, alternating with metal, under basically the same premise as metal, but a little bit more detailed because I am a little bit more knowledgeable about prog music. So basically what will happen is metal will come out one week and then this will come out the next week. The show is going to be basically talking about one specific progressive rock band. There'll be details about their history, about their albums, and about where they're going in the future, kind of thing. So this is my second recording of it. The first one I had didn't notice I banged the button and turned it off about halfway through and just finished it anyways without realizing it. So I got to start again. Anyways, I do apologize for that. So we'll start out by doing the band that we're going to do tonight, which is Pink Floyd. They have a fairly lengthy history going back to 1963 all the way up to now. So that's like almost 60 years now. And we will try my best not to bang it this time. Okay, so anyways, I'll start out by listing the members of the band. There's been 5 members of Pink Floyd over their history. 5 and 5 only. Started out with 4, added 1, and then 1 left the band. So the members, I'll just give you a list of them. So Roger Waters, bass player and lead vocalist, born September the 6th, 1943, and is so therefore is 81 years of age. Nick Mason, born January the 27th, 1944, is now 79, will be 80 this year. He is the drummer and percussionist. Richard Wright, born July the 28th, 1943, passed away on September the 15th, 2008, at the age of 65, keyboards and synthesizers. Roger Keith Sid Barrett was born January the 6th, 1946, and died July the 7th, 2006, at the age of 60. He was lead guitarist and vocalist. David Gilmour, born March the 6th, 1946, age 78, also lead guitarist and vocalist. He was the one that replaced Sid Barrett, who left the band. Okay, so basically Roger Waters and Nick Mason met while in school together studying architecture at London's Polytechnic in 1963. They formed a band called Sigma Six with Keith Noble and Cliff Medcliffe, and then later in the year Richard Wright joined the band, and I guess Bob Close was also a member of the band, and so they were a sextet. The band went through multiple name changes in during their tour, as apparently maybe this is common, but a lot of bands in that time period would change their name periodically so they could get gigs other places, or maybe some members didn't like a name and they changed it. I'm not really sure what the reasoning was they changed so often, but they had quite a few names: the Megadeths, the Abdabs, the Screaming Abdabs, the Leonard Lodgers, and the Spectrum 5, and then they eventually settled on the T-Set, and then that name actually they disavowed because there was they were on a bill to play in a kind of a festival type thing with other bands, and one of the other bands was called the T-Set as well, so they decided at that point that they had to take on a new name. In 1964, both Medcalf and Noble left the band to form their own band to do their own thing. They were replaced by Sid Barrett on guitar to go along with Bob Close, who was the lead guitarist at the time. Sid was a friend of Roger Waters as a child. They were friends together. They knew a technician named Chris Denon. He allowed them some free time to record at a studio, so they got some of that practice in. Close quit the band in mid-1965. basically because his parents forced him to do that, and the faculty and members of his fraternity talked him out of it because they said, you know, you're here to go to university and should spend time doing that and not waste your time doing this. I'm guessing that's what happened. I don't know for sure. So Barrett took over lead guitars, and at this point he was doing lead vocals too. They changed their name in late '65 to the Pink Floyd Sound, and then later just to the Floyd Sound, the Pink Floyd's. Later they changed to just the Pink Floyd, and then they just simplified it to Pink Floyd. They took this name from a couple of Carolina blues players named Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. I think that was his name, yeah. At this point in time, Peter Jennings saw them playing, and him and Andrew King took over and became the managers of the groups. They got them some coverage in the Financial Times, so they were getting noticed. And in 1967, they signed them to EMI. Their first single, Arnold Lane. Their second single was Emily Play. See Emily Play. So at this point in time, they're doing singles because they're kind of more of a pop singles, pop psychedelic band at this point. They were on the Top of the Pops TV program a few times. On the third time out, Barrett was completely out of it. He's been using LSD for a while, and it was affecting his schizophrenia, and this damaged their credibility, but they still kept him in the band. Then they decided at this point, once they got the label, they would start working on their first album, which is this one, Pipers at the Gates of Dawn. See if I can get, oh, there's a clear shot of it. It's pretty psychedelic. A bunch of pictures of them spaced out, like different frames of them. At this point, Barrett is the leader of the band. The album is pretty psychedelic. And it's considered by a lot of psychedelic people as a masterpiece. It features Waters, Barrett, Wright, and Mason on it. That's the band at this point in time. Reached number 6 on the UK charts, and Barrett wrote 8 of the 9 tracks, with Waters writing the other one. I think Waters actually sang the other one as well. I don't think he just played it. I wrote it. I think he also sang it. So I'm going to slip this page and hope that I don't bang the thing, which is what I did the other time. So I'm trying to keep it off to the side here. So Barrett had a bit of a mental illness, as you know. I think he suffered from schizophrenia, and when you're doing LSD, that probably makes it a much harder way to live, right? Seeing everything but what reality is. The album received critical reception by people like Paul McCartney, who said it was, who highly rated the album. In 1967, due to Syd Barrett's illness, the band added David Gilmour as the second guitar player, kind of to back them up, because a couple times Syd did not show up, or he came on stage and did nothing, which kind of, they had to cancel some concerts because of it. It's kind of doesn't help your career when that happens. So, at this point, it's now 1968. They released their second album, Saucers Full of Secrets. This is a great album. I like it. Released June of 1968. Recorded at Abbey Road Studios. And it was started under Syd Barrett's leadership, but eventually, because of his illness, they kind of took it over and started doing it themselves. Mason and Wright could... I'm pretty sure it's Mason and Waters, but Mason and Waters could not read music, so they had to get help with that. And Barrett only did the one song on here, which is Jung Band Blues, which is the last track. It's the last song he performed with them. He wrote it and sang it, and he didn't do anything else for them after that. This is the first Hypnosis cover for Pink Floyd's albums. I think it's a really good one myself. And very psychedelic, which is what their music was. Very psychedelic. I've listened to this really psychedelic album. The next album that came out was a music score, their first big one, from the movie More, and that's the title of this album. This was released on June the 3rd, 1969. It's a soundtrack, of course, their third, and also considered their third studio album, first soundtrack album. This is also the first album without Syd Barrett on it. and who had been replaced by this time by Gilmour, who was now full-time doing all of Sid's role as vocalist and guitar player. This is about a young hitchhiker in Ibiza who became a heroin addict. That's what the story is about, and the album is the score for it. Recorded by Pi Studios, and Gilmour handled all the lead vocals on this particular album. Next album up, Ummagumma, a double album. This is a double album released November 1969. Has one live CD and then one studio with individual parts by each member of the band. Mason, Wright, Gilmour, Waters all did their own parts in this. It was well received when it first came out by band members, but over time it was considered not that great of an album and they just looked at it differently as they got older. They said, why did we do that? Doesn't make any sense, But at any rate, the album was received very well. The next album up, first one in the 1970s, Atom Heart Mother, released October 1970. Another Hypnosis cover. I believe this is a Hypnosis cover. Does it say that on it anywhere? You know what? I don't actually know if it is. I think it is, though. Anyways, the Waters said, Waters' take on this album was that he wished people would just not listen to it and throw it in the trash can. And Gilmour said, this is just a pile of rubbish. So they didn't think much of it, but it did reach #1, their first such album to do so, and hugely successful album in Britain. In 1971, the band came second place in the Melody Maker in a contest, making a profit. Mason and Wright became fathers and bought houses for the first time. They spent time trying to make music using household appliances. There's a few days when they did this later in time too, but there's a couple days where they spent the whole day taking appliances and pieces of stuff in the house and trying to make music out of it. That sounds like Pink Floyd, doesn't it? That's why. That's part of the reason why I had a hard time with them initially, because it just sounded like a bunch of noises to me. It didn't really sound like music, but when you start to listen to it, it makes a great deal more sense. The next album up came out October 1971, Metal. This is the album with Echoes, one of their big tracks, and many feel that they really reached a peak with that particular track. It's a sidelong song, I believe. I believe it is. It reached #3 on the UK charts, 82 weeks on the charts. This album marked a shift from the Barrett style of music and Barrett-led era to a complete switch over to the Floyd sound that they would become known for. Rolling Stone magazine stated that Gilmour was an emerging force with this band and was shaping the band's future. Some people found the album kind of weak and made the comments that they make a lot of noise that doesn't really sound like music, and that would be somebody like me. Then the next album up is another music score, Obscured by Clouds, released June 1972, their 7th studio album, recorded, album mixed at Morgan Studios in London. After recording and finishing, the band felt that they didn't get along with the film company, so they decided to change the name to Obscured instead of La Valley, which was the movie that it was supposed to be. Burning Bridges was the only one of 2 tracks which Gilmour and Waters wrote together. I think the other one is Dogs. Don't count me on. I'll know that when we get there. Yeah, so this is the last time that David Gilmour wrote any lyrics until he reached Momentary Lapse of Reason, which was after Roger Waters left the band. Okay, the next album, of course, is their legendary album, Dark Side of the Moon. So Dark Side of the Moon was recorded at Abbey Road with Alan Parsons as its producer, released March 1973. This is another Hypnosis album cover. Great one, I think. It's an iconic reflecting prism. So actually the reference is to illusion of a lunacy as opposed to an astronomical reference. It doesn't refer to the moon. It's referring to psychosis. Probably it was designed in the thoughts of Syd Barrett, so you have a full person going in to the prism and coming out fractured. Makes a great deal of sense, right? Now that you think about it. Waters writes all the lyrics. It was an instant overnight success. Huge commercial success. Reached #1 on the US charts and stayed on the charts for 14 years, including selling 45 million copies. At this point, the band was not getting along with Capitol Records. I just want to see something here, if I can get it open. Yeah, this was originally a Capitol Records, and then they switched to Columbia for North America. Next up, gotta make sure I don't hit that stupid thing. Don't want to do this a third time. Next up, Wish You Were Here. So after recording Dark Side of the Moon and touring it and having written Obscured by Clouds while they were still writing material for Dark Side of the Moon, they were kind of burned out, drained. Mason had a failing marriage. Waters found it torturous to do it, another album so soon after. Despite all this chaos, he eventually got his act together, came up with a concept, did the writing, helped with the music, and he visualized a new concept. Barrett actually showed up while they were recording this, and they didn't even recognize him. He had changed, his physical appearance had changed, but he was mentally out of it, and this upset Roger Waters quite a bit. They premiered this album at an open-air concert on July 5th, 1975. I think it's magnificent. Next up, Animals. Animals was released January 1977. This is loosely about the George Orwell novel Animal Farm, if you're familiar with it, in which it's a communist manifesto. He wrote about how communism works, basically through animals, through a farm. So they kind of loosely used that, and they chose animal names: pigs on a wing, dogs, pigs, three different ones. Sheep and pigs on a wing too. And actually, I was right, dogs, Waters and Gilmour wrote together. I think it's the only other song they wrote together. So this is another Hypnosis cover, factory setting with a pig floating around there, I think, above the factory. I can't really, oh yeah, you can see it. The conflicts at this point between Roger Waters and Richard Wright were getting kind of severe. They weren't getting along at all. Gilmour had his first child at this point. Wright had marital problems, and probably that and Roger Waters on his case caused him to start losing it. Also, they were playing at these huge stadiums by this time, and they weren't really comfortable with that. It was unnerving to them. Gilmour said that they had peaked as an accomplished band, and that they had nothing left to give. And Waters' ego was completely out of control. So you get chaos going everywhere, but still produced a magnificent album, right? Next up, The Wall. This was a concept album released on November of 1979. First album without a Hypnosis cover. It was just a brick wall with Pink Floyd The Wall written on it. Final Wright they fired Wright during this because he wasn't doing anything. He would just show up, wander around, work on some production stuff, and not contribute any music. So after a while, they got fed up with him and fired him out of the group. Well, they gave him a choice: leave or they'll fire him. So he left. They released their first single since Money, which was Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. It topped the charts. This topped the charts in the U.S. charts. And sold 23 million copies. And the members at this point were not talking. None of them were getting along. There's all kinds of problems. And there wasn't a lot of contribution from anybody other than Roger Waters, and the guitar parts from Gilmour and some drum tracks from Nick Mason. Then we have the album The Final Cut, which is the last Roger Waters album. So what, at this point in time, it's March of 1983, the album comes out. It's basically material left over from The Wall and some new stuff that they recorded and created in 1982. Gilmour had a lot of problems with this. He didn't think they should have used that. He wanted time to write more music for it, and they didn't want to give him any. Wright is not on this album. It's the first one he wasn't on. It's the only one I think he wasn't on. Conflict between Waters and Gilmour was reaching huge proportions, and the involvement by Nick Mason was almost nil, if nothing at all, right? So not a good time for the band. At that point, Waters leaves the group and then files a legal battle over the name, and eventually the band was controlled by Gilmour. He won the legal battles in court, and they made some kind of concession with Waters where they got the name, Mason and Gilmour got the name, and Waters got... well, he was given The Wall. Basically, The Wall was, he got rights to The Wall. I think he may have got some other stuff too, but I don't know because he didn't really say anything about that. Momentary Lapse of Reason was the next album, their 13th. September of 1987. I don't actually have a copy of this either. Well, actually, I do have a copy of it, but I looked everywhere and couldn't find it, so I'll have to keep looking. I know I have it, though. It's the one with all the beds on it. Yeah. I'm sure I have it somewhere. I just don't know where I put it. Waters criticized the album as weak and third-rate, and the lyrics, he said, were not up to snuff. Gilmour thought it was a return to form. Wright basically said Waters was right. It's not really that great of an album, and it sounds more like a Gilmour solo album. So it's unusual that Wright would take Waters' side. I thought that kind of funny. The last album by the group that I have, there's one more after this. This is the Division Bell. The remaining members of the band, Wright, Mason, and Gilmour, worked on this album, although Wright was actually an employee and not really a member of the band. Ezrin produced this. Bob Ezrin produced the album. The cover was by Storm Jurgensen, which with the posing two faces, which are supposed to be Syd Barrett and Roger Waters, and they come together to form a unity. Kind of a cool cover, actually. This made it to #1 for 51 weeks on the chart, UK chart, so another successful album. This album actually sounds much more like Pink Floyd than its predecessor. And although it's not a fantastic album, it's much more like Pink Floyd than its predecessor, and better, I think, than the one before that, even in Final Cut. So that's it for the albums, except for Endless River, which was a collection of songs that were left over from Division Bell that they put together as a tribute to Richard Wright. I don't own it. I haven't listened to it, so I'm not going to comment about it. I'll just leave it at that. In 2005-2006, the members, including Roger Waters, appeared for the Live 8 concert. They decided to put their personal stuff aside, as Gilmour said, we're putting our personal stuff aside because this is more important. So that's good that they were able to do that. They were offered $130 million to tour after this, but they turned it down. Gilmour said that the band is effectively finished, citing his age and preference to work alone. On July 7, 2006, at the age of 60, Syd Barrett died. And they had in May 10th, 2007, they had a tribute concert with all the members showing up for that. The next year, in 2008, on September the 15th, at age 65, Richard Wright died of cancer. Mason formed the Saucerful of Secrets at this point, which is basically playing older Floyd stuff. And then Waters and Gilmour, over the last half dozen years or so, have had huge fights with each other over Ukraine, amongst other things. They just don't get along, see eye to eye. My guess is that this band will never form again or never play with each other again. It's unfortunate because I think about if they had gotten themselves together after the Wall, like took in some hiatus time, maybe 5 or 6 years off, or even half a decade or something, and then got back together, they could have produced some very, very solid material. Maybe half a dozen more great albums, but you know how it is with these bands. They don't always see eye to eye, and they don't always get over what's going on. So as it is right now, they're officially done. David Gilmour will not play with them anymore. I don't think Nick Mason would pursue it. And Roger Waters has his own thing going on, and you know, Richard Wright's gone, so there's not much chance that there'll be any more Floyd, which is kind of sad in a way. I wish there was going to be at least one more album, would be nice, you know, but they did put out a huge volume of great stuff, and I like this band a lot. This is my first kind of really in-depth study of them over the last week. Doing this kind of thing makes me really study all as much as I can, listen to all their music, and I've grown to like them quite a bit more. They're a band that will, I think, eventually make me have to change it from my group of 8 to my group of 9. I think that's probably coming. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Into the Progverse, which will come out again in 2 weeks with another one. I think I'm going to continue with these big bands for a bit because I have lots to do, and it'll either be Rush, Yes, or Genesis. One of those three. I haven't decided which one I want to do. Will be the next one we do on Into the Progverse. And that'll take place in 2 weeks. But next week we will have an episode of metal. I'm going to be doing the same band that I did on the What's New episode last week. And I don't have that with me, so I don't even remember what the name of the band is. It's Cluster something. But anyways, he has 3 albums. I'm going to do a little bit of a history thing on him for the new band part of my metal. So I do basically with metal, I do a band that's newer than 10 years and then a band that's older than 10 years. I don't do that with a Progverse because I just want to do what I want to do. I'm not going to break it up that way. I know as much as I want to know about that. So anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm sorry it's coming out later than I thought. A mess up and just messed up. That's what happened. So please enjoy the video. Please hit the like and subscribe. If you have any comments about anything I've said, or if I missed something you think it's important, because when you have a band of such huge magnitude of stuff, it's hard to get it all down and remember everything. So if I missed anything, please put it in the comments section. I'd be much appreciated. And hit the division bell. Yeah, here, hit it. Yeah. Oh, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified of any more content. And I appreciate everything. I hope you have a good night. Enjoy the video, and we will see you later. Take care. Goodbye.